I think I didn't do anything wrong, just something every woman does, sharing a silly private photo of my husband with my friends. But now, I'm sitting here with legal papers in my hand, wondering how it all went so far that he cut me out of his life for good. It started on a Tuesday evening in our suburban townhouse. I was lounging on the living room couch, scrolling through my phone while Simon puttered around the kitchen, making his usual methodical dinner preparations. Our 7-year-old daughter Lila was upstairs, supposedly doing homework, but probably drawing those elaborate fantasy worlds she loved so much. My phone buzzed with messages from Maya Chen, my best friend since college. She was venting about her latest dating disaster, and soon our group chat was alive with commentary from the other girls. The conversation naturally drifted to relationships, marriages, and the little irritations we all dealt with. "At least your guy has passion," I typed, thinking about Simon's quiet, measured approach to everything. "Mine's like living with a civil engineering textbook that occasionally asks what's for dinner." Maya responded with laughing emojis. "Come on, he can't be that boring. Give us something juicy." I glanced toward the kitchen where Simon was carefully measuring ingredients, his methodical nature on full display. He'd always been like this, steady, reliable, but God, sometimes so predictable. I'd married him for his stability, but lately, that stability felt more like stagnation. "You want juicy?" I typed back, feeling mischievous. "Wait until you see his sexy selfie attempt from this morning." Before I could second-guess myself, I scrolled through my photos and found it. Simon's awkward attempt at a shirtless mirror selfie that he'd sent me earlier, probably hoping to be romantic. His expression was so earnest, so vulnerably hopeful, and the angle was just unfortunate. I hit send. The responses were immediate. Maya sent crying, laughing emojis. Sarah wrote, "Stop, I can't breathe." Jennifer added, "Girl, I'm deceased. The serious face." I was typing another comment when I heard footsteps behind me. Simon appeared at my shoulder, probably coming to ask about dinner preferences, when his eyes caught my phone screen. The group chat was open, his photo displayed prominently above a string of laughing reactions. For a moment, he just stood there, reading. I watched his face change. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that looked like physical pain. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. "Simon, it's just," I started, but he was already walking away, his shoulders rigid. "It's just what?" he called back without turning around. "It's just girl talk. You know how we are. It doesn't mean anything." He disappeared upstairs without another word, leaving me staring at my phone where the notifications kept coming. The girls were still laughing, still commenting, but suddenly the jokes felt less funny. Later that night, when I tried to explain, Simon just looked at me with those quiet eyes of his. "You think I'm oversensitive," he said. It wasn't a question. "I think you don't understand how women communicate," I replied, feeling defensive. "We share things. It's what we do. It wasn't malicious. It was a private moment between us, Morwenna. It was a photo, a silly photo that you took badly. If you can't laugh at yourself, with you, yes, not with strangers. They're not strangers, they're my friends. And honestly, if you're going to get this worked up over something so small, maybe you should think about why you're so insecure." Simon went quiet after that, which he always did when I made a valid point. He had always been too sensitive, too worried about what people thought. It was one of the things that frustrated me most about our marriage, his inability to just roll with things. The next morning, he was polite, but distant, making Lila's breakfast and gathering his work things with that same methodical precision. I tried to lighten the mood. "You're not really going to stay mad about this, are you? The girls already forgot about it." He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "Did they?" "Of course they did. It was just a moment of fun. You're making this into something it's not." Simon nodded slowly, but something in his expression made me uncomfortable. "I'm sure you're right," he said, and left for work. But I wasn't sure I was right, and when Maya texted me later asking if Simon was okay with the joke, I found myself lying and saying he'd laughed about it too. By Thursday, I was back to feeling justified. At work, I found myself venting to Aaron Collier, my charming co-worker who always seemed to understand my frustrations better than my own husband did. We were grabbing coffee in the break room when I mentioned the drama at home. "He's still upset about a photo?" Aaron asked, leaning against the counter with that easy smile of his. "Sounds like someone needs to develop a sense of humor." "That's what I said, but now he's giving me the silent treatment like I committed some terrible crime." Aaron shook his head sympathetically. "You know what your problem is, Morwenna. You're too vibrant for him. You need someone who appreciates your personality, not someone who makes you feel guilty for being yourself." The way he said it, with those warm eyes focused entirely on me, made something flutter in my chest. Aaron got it. He understood that I wasn't some villain. I was just a woman trying to connect with her friends, trying to find some joy in a marriage that had become predictably mundane. "Maybe you're right," I said, and when his hand brushed mine as he handed me sugar packets, I didn't pull away. That afternoon, I met Maya at our usual cafe. She seemed different somehow, less enthusiastic when I brought up the Simon situation. "I've been thinking about Tuesday night," she said carefully, stirring her latte. "Maybe we shouldn't have laughed so hard. I mean, he seemed really sweet in that photo. Vulnerable, you know." I felt a spike of irritation. "Since when are you defending Simon?" "I'm not defending anyone. If David sent me a photo like that and I shared it, he'd be devastated. Some things are meant to stay private." "So now you're on his side too?" I set down my cup harder than necessary. This is exactly what he wants, to make me feel like the bad guy for having normal friendships. Maya looked uncomfortable. "It's not about sides, Morwenna. I just think maybe..." "Maybe what? Maybe I should apologize for treating my friends like friends? Maybe I should ask his permission before I speak." "That's not what I'm saying." But it felt like what she was saying. It felt like everyone was ganging up on me, making me the villain in a story where I was clearly the victim. Simon was being controlling, trying to dictate how I communicated with my support system, and now he was turning my own friends against me. When I got home that evening, Simon was helping Lila with her homework at the kitchen table. They both looked up when I entered, and I caught something in Lila's expression, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "How was school, baby?" I asked, kissing the top of her head. "Good," she said quietly, then looked at Simon. "Daddy, can you help me with this math problem?" I noticed she didn't ask me. Usually she'd want both of us involved, but lately she seemed to gravitate toward Simon whenever there was any tension in the house. It was like she could sense the atmosphere, and it was affecting her. "Lila's been a little anxious this week," Simon said later after she'd gone to bed. "Maybe we should keep our discussions more private." "Our discussions? You mean when you give me the silent treatment for days?" "I mean when we argue about boundaries and respect." There was that word again, respect. As if I'd been disrespectful by sharing a moment of levity with my friends. As if my need for connection and understanding was somehow wrong. "I think you're being paranoid," I said. "And honestly, Simon, this whole victim act is getting old. I made a joke. One joke. If you can't handle that level of reality about our marriage, maybe the problem isn't me." Simon looked at me for a long moment. "Maybe you're right," he said finally. "Maybe the problem isn't you." Something in his tone made me pause, but before I could analyze it, my phone buzzed with a work email. The subject line made my blood run cold. "Personal conduct discussion. HR meeting required." I glanced at Simon, who was already heading upstairs, and felt a chill of real fear. He wouldn't have... Would he? The HR meeting was a nightmare. Apparently, someone had reported concerns about my personal conduct affecting the workplace environment. They wouldn't say who, but I had my suspicions. Simon knew people at my company. His engineering firm had worked with our marketing agency before. He could have made a call, planted seeds of doubt about my professionalism. I managed to convince HR that it was a misunderstanding, some personal drama that wouldn't affect my work, but the whole experience left me shaken and angry. If Simon thought he could sabotage my career over a harmless joke, he was more vindictive than I'd ever imagined. That Friday night, I met the girls for dinner at our usual spot, a trendy cafe downtown where we'd been gathering for years. Maya, Sarah, Jennifer, and 2 others from our extended friend group. I needed their support now more than ever. "You guys won't believe what Simon did," I began, diving straight into the HR situation. "He actually tried to get me in trouble at work. Over a photo!" But instead of the outrage I expected, I saw uncomfortable glances exchanged around the table. "Are you sure it was Simon?" Sarah asked carefully. "That seems pretty extreme." "Who else would it be? He's been punishing me all week for one moment of honesty with you guys." "Honesty?" Jennifer set down her wine glass. "Morwenna, you shared a private photo of your husband without his permission. That's not really honesty, that's what?" I felt my face getting hot. "That's friendship? That's normal human connection? God, you all act like I posted it on social media or something." Maya shifted in her seat. "Maybe we should talk about something else." "No, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how my own friends are abandoning me because my husband can't take a joke. Let's talk about how I'm supposed to live in a marriage where I can't be myself, can't share my real experiences with the people who matter to me." The table went quiet. I could see them all thinking the same thing, that I was being dramatic, that I was the problem. It was exactly what Simon wanted. "You know what the real issue is?" I continued, my voice getting louder. "He's emotionally abusive. He makes me feel guilty for having normal relationships, for being a real person instead of his perfect little housewife. And now he's trying to isolate me from you guys too." "Morwenna," Maya said softly, "maybe you should go home and talk to Simon. Work this out privately." "I can't work it out with someone who won't communicate, someone who punishes me for being honest about our problems." I was making a scene now. I could feel other diners looking our way, but I didn't care. These were supposed to be my people, my support system, and they were failing me just like Simon was. "I think," Jennifer said carefully, "maybe Simon has a point about privacy. I mean, what if someone shared a photo of you that you thought was just between you and them?" "That's different." "How is it different?" "Because I wouldn't be such a baby about it. I'd laugh it off and move on like a normal person." But even as I said it, I could hear how it sounded. The women around the table were looking at me with something that might have been pity, and that was worse than anger. I left the cafe feeling more isolated than ever. When I got home, Simon was reading in the living room, looking infuriatingly calm. "Have a nice dinner?" he asked, without looking up from his book. "Wonderful. Your campaign is working perfectly. My friends think I'm some kind of monster now. I haven't talked to your friends, Morwenna, but you talked to my boss." Now he did look up. "I haven't talked to your boss either." "Then who?" My phone buzzed with a text message from Simon, which was weird since he was sitting right there. I opened it. "We need to talk. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." I stared at the screen, then at Simon, who was watching me with those quiet, steady eyes. "Your lawyer?" I said. "Simon, you can't be serious." "I'm very serious." "Over a photo? You're going to destroy our family over a photo?" Simon closed his book and stood up. "It's not about the photo, Morwenna. It hasn't been about the photo for a long time." Something in his voice made my stomach drop. There was a certainty there, a finality that I'd never heard before. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means we'll discuss this through proper channels from now on. I think that's best for everyone." He headed toward the stairs, leaving me standing in the living room with my phone in my hand and a growing sense that I'd severely underestimated the situation. The law office was intimidating. All dark wood and leather chairs designed to make you feel small. Simon sat across from me with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she ate people like me for breakfast. His brother Max was there too, which felt like a betrayal. This was supposed to be between Simon and me. "Mrs. Pike," the lawyer began, "we're here to discuss the dissolution of your marriage and the terms of custody for your daughter." "Dissolution?" I looked at Simon. "Simon, this is insane. We can work this out. We don't need lawyers." "I think we do," he said quietly. "Over what? Over me sharing one photo with my friends? This is completely disproportionate." The lawyer slid a folder across the table toward me. "Mrs. Pike, perhaps you'd like to review the documentation we've compiled." My hands shook as I opened it. The first page was a printout of our group chat. Not just the photo, but weeks of messages. My complaints about Simon, my jokes about our sex life, my comments about his body, his personality, his habits. Seeing it all laid out like that, in black and white, it looked worse than I remembered. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came on page 3. Text messages between Aaron and me. Flirtatious at first, then increasingly intimate. Meeting times, hotel receipts, photos I'd sent that were definitely not meant for anyone else to see. "Where did you get these?" I whispered. "Your phone backs up to our shared cloud account," Simon said. "It has for years." I flipped through more pages. Time-stamped photos of Aaron leaving our house when Simon was at work. Credit card statements showing purchases I'd made for Aaron, expensive dinners, gifts, things I'd hidden from Simon. Even my work badge logs, showing the late nights Aaron and I had spent working together. "Simon?" I started, but my voice came out as a croak. "This isn't what it looks like." "What does it look like, Morwenna?" I stared at the evidence spread out in front of me. Months of deception, laid bare in neat, chronological order. But they were making it seem worse than it was. "Aaron doesn't mean anything," I said finally. "It was just, I was lonely. You were so distant, so cold. I needed someone who understood me." "So you had an affair?" "It wasn't an affair. It was just, we connected, emotionally, and yes, sometimes physically, but it wasn't serious. It wasn't real like us." Simon's lawyer made a note. "Mrs. Pike, are you admitting to an extramarital relationship?" "I'm admitting to being human, to having needs that weren't being met at home." I looked around the room, at Max's disgusted expression, at the lawyer's professional coldness, at Simon's terrible calm. "You're ruining our daughter's life," I said desperately. "Lila needs both her parents. You can't just tear apart her world because you're hurt." "Lila has been seeing the school counselor," Simon said. "She's been anxious, having trouble sleeping. She told the counselor she wishes Mommy and Daddy would stop fighting." "We weren't fighting. We were just having a rough patch. All couples go through this." "Do all couples share private photos without consent? Do all couples have affairs?" The lawyer slid another document across the table. "Mrs. Pike, this is a restraining order preventing you from sharing any additional private information about Mr. Pike on social media or in private communications. Violation of this order will result in legal consequences." "You can't be serious." "We're very serious," the lawyer said. "Mr. Pike has also filed for primary custody of your daughter, with supervised visitation for you pending a psychological evaluation." The room started to spin. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. "Simon, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Aaron. I'll do whatever you want." Simon looked at me for a long moment. "What I want," he said finally, "is for you to stop making me feel like I'm crazy for expecting basic respect from my wife. I never—" "You did, Morwenna. For months. Every time I tried to tell you something hurt me. You told me I was being too sensitive. Every time I asked for privacy, You told me I was being controlling. Every time I needed support, you told me I was being needy. I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because looking at all the evidence laid out on that table, I could see what he meant. I could see how it might have looked from his perspective. But that didn't make me the villain here. I was trying to save our marriage, I said. I was trying to get help, to connect with people who could give me advice. If you had just been more present, more engaged, none of this would have happened. Simon nodded slowly. You're right, he said. If I had been different, you wouldn't have had to humiliate me publicly and cheat on me privately. It's all my fault. The sarcasm in his voice was devastating, because Simon never used sarcasm. Simon was always sincere, always earnest. The fact that I'd driven him to this level of bitterness made something crack inside my chest, but I couldn't let him see that. I couldn't give him that satisfaction. Fine, I said, standing up. If this is how you want to play it, we'll play it. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. As I walked out of that office, I could hear the lawyer explaining next steps to Simon, talking about mediation and custody evaluations and asset division. They were dismantling my life with the same methodical precision Simon brought to everything else. And the worst part was, I still didn't understand how we'd gotten here. The mediation sessions were torture. Sitting in those sterile rooms with Simon and our lawyers, trying to divide up 7 years of marriage like we were splitting up a business partnership. Simon remained calm throughout all of it, answering questions in that steady, measured way of his, while I felt like I was coming apart at the seams. Mrs. Pike, the mediator said during our third session, can you explain your perspective on the custody arrangement? My perspective is that this is insane, I said. I'm Lila's mother. I've been her primary caregiver since she was born. Simon works 60-hour weeks. I'm the one who's always been there for her. According to the school records, Simon's lawyer interjected, you've missed 17 parent-teacher conferences in the past 2 years. Mr. Pike attended all of them. I had work obligations. I'm trying to build a career, not just coast along in some safe, boring job. Mrs. Pike, the mediator said gently, we're not here to judge anyone's career choices. We're here to determine what's best for Lila. What's best for Lila is having her mother in her life, not being raised by someone who thinks sharing a photo is grounds for divorce. Is that really what you think this is about? Simon spoke for the first time that session, his voice quiet but steady. One photo? Isn't it? He looked at me with something that might have been sadness. Morwenna, you had an affair. For 6 months. You shared intimate details about our marriage with strangers. You mocked me publicly and privately. When I tried to talk to you about any of it, you told me I was being paranoid and controlling. I never said, you did. It's all documented. Every conversation, every text message, every time you made me feel like I was losing my mind for having basic human feelings. The mediator made notes while I tried to find words to defend myself. But how do you defend against the truth? I was struggling, I said finally. I felt trapped and unheard and desperate for connection. Yes, I made mistakes, but they came from a place of pain. Simon was emotionally unavailable. He made me feel invisible in my own marriage. So you decided to make him invisible in his own life. I stared at Simon. That's not what I did. You shared photos of me without permission. You told your friends intimate details about our relationship. You complained about me to your coworker and then started sleeping with him. You made me into a joke, Morwenna. A pathetic figure that people could laugh at and pity. That wasn't my intention. What was your intention when you sent that photo? I opened my mouth and then closed it. Because the truth was, my intention had been to get laughs at his expense. To bond with my friends over how awkward and earnest my husband was. To feel superior and sophisticated and free. I wanted to connect with my friends, I said weakly, by humiliating me. By being honest about my life. Whose life more buena, yours or mine? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Because he was right. I'd been telling my story, not our story. My version of events, where he was the boring, insensitive husband and I was the misunderstood wife, just trying to find some joy. But that wasn't the whole truth, was it? Mr. Pike, the mediator said, what are you hoping to achieve with this custody arrangement? I want my daughter to grow up knowing she's safe, Simon said. I want her to understand that her private moments won't be turned into entertainment. I want her to see that actions have consequences, and that the people who love you don't use you as material for jokes. Every word felt like a slap. Because I could see Lila in my mind. Quiet, sensitive Lila who'd been drawing pictures of families with sad faces lately, who'd started asking why Mommy and Daddy didn't laugh together anymore. I love my daughter, I said. I know you do, Simon replied. But love isn't enough if it comes with humiliation as a side effect. The final custody ruling gave Simon primary physical custody, with me getting supervised visits twice a week and every other weekend. I had to attend counseling and complete a program on digital privacy and consent. The judge also upheld the restraining order, warning me that any further sharing of private information would result in contempt charges. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I was in someone else's life. How had I gone from being a wife and mother to being a supervised visitor in my own daughter's life? But even then, even with all the evidence and all the consequences, part of me still felt like the victim. Like Simon had overreacted and the system had failed me. It would take me much longer to understand that the system had actually worked exactly as it was supposed to. The house felt enormous and empty with just me in it. Simon had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment across town, taking Lila with him during his custody time. When she was with me, she seemed smaller somehow, more fragile, asking careful questions about when she could see Daddy again. I tried to make our time together special, movie nights, elaborate breakfasts, trips to the zoo, but there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before, like she was protecting herself from something she couldn't quite name. Mommy, she said one Saturday morning while we were making pancakes, why did you and Daddy stop being married? I'd practiced this conversation in my head a dozen times, but sitting there looking at her serious little face, all my prepared answers seemed inadequate. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said carefully, and sometimes those mistakes hurt people we love. Did you make mistakes? The question was so direct, so innocent, that it took my breath away. Because the honest answer was yes. I had made mistakes, lots of them. But admitting that felt like giving up the last piece of my dignity. We both made mistakes, baby. Marriage is complicated. Lila nodded solemnly, but I could see she wasn't satisfied with that answer. She was Simon's daughter. She wanted specifics, details, logical explanations for why her world had fallen apart. Later that week, I tried calling Simon directly. I'd been communicating through lawyers for months, but surely we could have one adult conversation about our daughter's well-being. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried texting, but got an automated response saying the number had blocked me. Even my emails bounced back undelivered. It was like I'd been erased from his life completely. I drove by his apartment one evening, telling myself I just wanted to see where Lila was living, make sure it was safe. Through the window, I could see them at the kitchen table. Simon helping with homework, both of them laughing at something. They looked peaceful, happy even. It struck me that I couldn't remember the last time Simon and I had laughed together. Really laughed, not the bitter, sarcastic exchanges that had become our norm. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Hey, how are you holding up? It was the first time any of my friends had reached out in weeks. I called her immediately. Maya, thank God. I've been going crazy with no one to talk to. I know, and I'm sorry I've been distant. This whole situation has just been a lot. Tell me about it. Simon has turned everyone against me. Even my own daughter barely talks to me anymore. There was a pause. Morwenna, can I ask you something? And please don't get mad. Of course. Do you think maybe Simon had a point about the privacy thing? I felt that familiar spike of anger. Not you too. I'm not taking sides. I keep thinking about that photo, and if I'm being honest, I felt uncomfortable laughing at it. He looked so vulnerable, so trusting. It was just a joke. I know. But jokes can hurt people too. After I hung up, I sat in my car outside Simon's apartment building, watching the warm light from his windows. Somewhere in there, my daughter was probably getting ready for bed, being tucked in by her father who read her stories in different voices and never missed a goodnight kiss. I thought about all the times I'd dismissed Simon's feelings as oversensitivity, all the times I'd rolled my eyes at his need for privacy, his discomfort with being the subject of my stories. I'd thought I was being honest and open, but maybe what I'd really been doing was using him as material for my own entertainment. The final divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a courier who made me sign for them like they were some kind of precious cargo. Along with them was a notification that Simon had updated all of Lila's emergency contacts, school pickup authorizations, and medical decisions. My name had been removed from everything except the supervised visitation schedule. I was officially a stranger in my own family's life. That night, I wrote Simon a long letter. Not an email that could be blocked, but an actual handwritten letter that I planned to mail to his office. I poured everything into it. My regrets, my apologies, my desperate desire to find some way back to the people I'd lost. But when I read it over the next morning, all I could see were more justifications, more explanations for why my actions had been understandable given the circumstances. Even in my apology, I was still making myself the victim. I threw the letter away. 6 months later, I got a notification that Simon had filed to change Lila's last name back to his mother's maiden name. The paperwork cited ongoing harassment and boundary violations as justification for wanting to distance our daughter from any association with me. I wanted to fight it, but my lawyer advised against it. You've already violated the restraining order twice with those social media posts, she reminded me. The judge is not inclined to be sympathetic. Those posts. I'd been so careful to not mention Simon by name, but apparently sharing vague stories about toxic ex-husbands and parental alienation still counted as harassment when everyone knew who I was talking about. Sitting in my empty house with those final legal documents spread across my kitchen table, I finally understood what I'd lost. Not just a marriage or a custody arrangement, but the respect and trust of everyone who mattered to me. I'd traded my family's privacy for a few moments of feeling clever and connected, and now I was more isolated than I'd ever been. The last text I received from Simon came through his lawyer's office. All future communication regarding Lila will go through the court-appointed mediator. Do not attempt to contact Mr. Pike or his family directly. I'd been cut out completely, surgically removed from the life I'd helped build, and the most devastating part was that I was finally beginning to understand why. But understanding doesn't undo damage. It doesn't bring back trust once it's been shattered, or restore respect once it's been lost. It just helps you see, with perfect clarity, exactly how you destroyed everything you claim to love. I keep the divorce papers in a folder on my kitchen counter, next to the restraining order and the custody modification. Receipts of a life I dismantled one joke, one betrayal, one boundary violation at a time. Sometimes I wonder if Simon ever thinks about me, if he ever misses what we had before I turned it into entertainment. But then I remember the look in his eyes that last day in court, not anger or hatred, but something worse. Relief. He was relieved to be free of me. And maybe, in the quiet moments when I'm being completely honest with myself, I can understand why. The joke was on me all along. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.